Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the September 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Housing and Economic Development Committee. Glad to have everybody with us. First, Michelle, are there any public comments for us? Or Kathy?
No, I don't have anything, Martha.
Okay. Thank you very much. We do have a couple of changes to the agenda, and I appreciate that Michelle sent them out earlier this week, but resent them this morning. There are two resolutions. Does everybody have them? We'll hope that, yeah, I see nods. Okay, great. So I'll ask for a motion to put the two on the agenda. The first is resolution ID 10405, authorization of New York State Department of Transportation Mass Transportation Capital Project Agreement, Tompkins County and TCAT Incorporated, K007463. I'm sorry, that's probably the second one, but whatever. So the other one is 10384, releasing municipal and school district contributions to the Tompkins County Broadband Study and replacing the other government's contributions to the county with the use of fund balance. So can I get a motion for those two to be added to the agenda? Annie moves, seconded by Shauna. Any discussion? All right, I'll ask a vote. Mike Sigler?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so those are added. We'll do I'm gonna ask, we'll do the Dwight, the TCAT resolution at the end of the meeting and the broadband resolution when Nick Helmholtz is with us later in the meeting in around 10:50 or so. So, all right, thank you very much. How about the minutes of August 26th, the comprehensive and detailed minutes of August 26th? Moved by Shauna, seconded by Annie. Any comments or discussion? All right, let's vote. I'll go Mike.
Yes.
Annie.
Yes.
Shauna.
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
I'm a yes, so that's also unanimous. Thank you so much. Lisa, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Martha.
So I'll hand the microphone over to you for any report that you have.
Okay, probably just a few brief updates of interest to this committee. We, as per the last special legislature meeting where the Community Recovery Fund was proposed and adopted, we're working on, per the procurement procedure and policies for looking for professional services, contracting out for an organization or entity to manage this fund. So we're in the process of developing an RFP, and that should be forthcoming, as soon as we can. We're working on the shared services plan for the coming year. Amy Hendricks is spearheading that among municipalities, looking for shared projects to promote efficiencies, cost savings, etc. Some of which I see are on today's agenda for HEDs for consideration, for discussion. So that will be interesting. And other than that, still working, in concert with the health department on COVID response, and this is the time of year where we're very involved with budget deliberations. So a lot going on as usual.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you for the report. Developing the RFP on the Community Recovery Fund. I checked. I was in a meeting yesterday, and I mentioned that. I'm sorry. Mentioned that that we had taken this vote for $7 million for a fund. People didn't know anything about it, so I checked with Dominic, and he had not done any press on our decision. I wonder if it would be helpful, in sort of getting the word out, if perhaps a simple press release from Dominic might be able to go out, just that the county did make this decision, the purposes, and what the next steps are. Would that be
Sure.
possible?
Sure, we can talk with him about it. Mhm.
Thank you. That sounds great. Appreciate that. Any questions, other questions from committee members or other legislators I see on here? Okay. All right. Well, Lisa, thank you so very much. All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time and all that work. We know it's just always so much going on, but this seems even, worse than usual. I wanted to go back a bit. I see something in chat, but listen, folks, I can't talk and read at the same time. So I think we have some people who are in the call who wanted to talk on public comment. Now, the folks who have a proposal, I'm looking at Richard and Paula, you'll get your turn when we come to the proposal, but if there's somebody, Cosimo, Fabrizio, we can, a couple of minutes for public comment. Is that what you're interested in?
Yeah, if that's all right with you.
Sure, go ahead.
Beautiful. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cosimo Fabrizio. I'm a senior studying economics and government at Cornell. I've been, over the past 2-3 years, had the privilege of working with people like Professor Dr. Paula, Richard Rivera, and Tali and others on this reentry project that I know that they've been presenting before other subcommittees in the county legislature. But I wanted to speak briefly from my perspective as a student on why I think this sunflower housing proposal that you guys will hear about shortly is so critical. Starting as a sophomore, I was on a daily, weekly basis interviewing formerly incarcerated people who were trickling down from upstate facilities in the state down to Tompkins County and Ithaca specifically, with the goal of trying to understand why in a community like Ithaca's that's so progressive, that has such a incredible landscape of nonprofits, so many resources seemingly at our disposal, why there is still such a huge issue for people reentering successfully into the community. And the number one reason that we heard over and over and over again, regardless of the circumstances of their incarceration or the circumstances of their reentry, was that housing posed an incredibly difficult barrier to overcome in terms of successful reentry. People who had to search for housing out of the community tended to land themselves back in some form of incarceration due to basic parole violations on technicalities, because it was very difficult for them to get to the court. These people also found it more difficult to even something as simple as getting to job interviews, because we take for granted that people don't always have money at their disposal to go and get a bus pass or call for an Uber to something. So the more we did these interviews, and we ended up fortunately doing, I think, around 54 interviews specifically, we realized that if the county were trying to make substantial progress on the issue of reentry, which, as Dr. Paula and Tali, and I think even Marquand will speak to more, has sizable externalities positively on things like decreasing operational expenses and helping us reduce disparities in racial and ethnic front in terms of incarceration. More broadly, we would be able to provide people a better foundation for meaningfully reentering from a period of incarceration. And for me, as a student who has done this research, I'm very excited by this proposal. I know at least I can speak on behalf of the students at Cornell, the Student Assembly. Marquand will speak to Black student unions, pre-law organizations. In reading this proposal, this seems to be something that we study in our classes: is how can you help people reenter better? You start with housing first, and it's something that very fortunate to be a part of, hoping to have more opportunities to speak about it on another subcommittee meeting. But appreciate you all taking the time this morning and looking forward to doing whatever I can to get this proposal approved.
Thanks so much, Cosmo. Marquand Frederick?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Cosmo said, my name is Marquand Frederick. I'm a sophomore studying government at Cornell University on campus. I'm served as the political action chair for Black Student United, and I'm also involved in several pre-law organizations. And I've noticed that, all the students are in support of this, proposed legislation, and that being the reason that housing affordability and housing accessibility seems to be a systemic problem that a lot of people that are on parole do not have access to. This is a problem that has affected marginalized communities for decades, and we feel that not only providing housing, but hitting the barriers, hitting the systemic problems by providing that sort of house manager system would benefit them in various ways. As we said, this has a lot of cost benefit. For example, we predict that if 20 less parolees were incarcerated, the county could save roughly $390,000 to $444,400 a year by providing and subsidizing that affordability. And we also believe that, you provide them professional development in the form of resumes, identification cards, job searches, and simply just helping them, referring them to mental health services, to job applications, and to government subsidies. We feel that that could do more good than harm. People coming from serving time in incarceration, they often don't have those skills. They often don't have those resources. And like Cosmo said, transportation is an issue that affects these communities, especially people coming from rural areas. So we believe that if we could hit those targets, if we could provide them with the care and the resources that they need, it could have benefits that can not only affect them, it could not only benefit the county and save the county a lot of money, but it can provide a safer society, a safer county for everyone involved. And we've also spoken to several law enforcement agents who also support these policies. And we feel that it's just a betterment for the community.
Thank you so very much, Mark Kwan. I appreciate that. Mike Sigler, did you have your hand up? You went up and then down again?
Well, I have a question, but just you finish up and then I can ask the question later.
Sure. Is there anybody else who is waiting for public comment? Okay, go ahead, Mike.
It's actually a question on this, but it's public comment, so it's not really appropriate to do it now. So we'll just do it later. It's fine.
Okay. All right. Well, Mark Kwan and Cosmo, I guess, are we ready to vote, committee? I think they've laid it out really well. Thank you so very much for your comments. Appreciate it. All right. Well, then let us go. We'll come back to this pretty soon on the agenda, but we have another topic first. And it's really under my chair's report that I wanted to talk a little bit about this topic of county code enforcement that we put on the agenda. We had it on our goals list for the year. This has come up over the years off and on and kind of gets raised and then dropped and raised and then dropped. And then when CJ Randall, the planning director for the town of Lansing, brought this up earlier this year at the planning advisory board meeting, I thought, okay, this really, maybe this is really the year to try to pick this up, this topic. As folks know, there are code officials in every municipality, and they have a mixture of different kinds of responsibilities. And in some of the, especially in the outlying towns, the smaller towns, they have trouble really supporting a full-time code director or code officer. And in many cases, they share with other municipalities. And the point CJ was making at the Planning Advisory Board meeting was that we're seeing a lot of impending retirements of these professionals who are working on the important issues of health and safety, following zoning, property maintenance, et cetera, in our built environment. But if there aren't the personnel to actually carry out those inspections, then we're likely to see some real problems. So since found out that that this is really identified as a statewide issue, there was a state Senate investigation a couple of years ago that showed that the statewide code compliance is really suffering because of lack of personnel. And this issue of retirements coming up is really affecting many, many municipalities. Southern Tier 8, a regional planning organization, has identified it as a challenge. And CJ sent me this report that had been done, finished in 2020 by CGR, a consultant firm out of Rochester that we've used for a number of studies. And you've got the first number of pages in your packet from the study that was done for Tioga County. And I didn't have Michelle print out the whole 50-some pages, but you can see the full table of contents. So the study really has sort of lays out the options for a county, for countywide code enforcement, or, for shared services with municipalities. And I wanted to make sure that our legislature had a chance to just take a good look at this. There are a number of reasons why this could be beneficial. And I wanted to open up the conversation. I found out Katie Borgella put me in touch with the planning director from Tioga County, Elaine Jardine, and we had a good conversation the other day. She told me that the study that CGR did, including a schedule report about their fees, the total was $70,000. So that's one piece. Based on this study, Elaine has put forward a request for 3 county code officers and an assistant within the Tioga County government. So she's sort of based on that and looking at all the issues that they are facing. That was her response to this study, that they would like to move ahead in that direction. So we have a few people who in the past I know have expressed interest in this issue. And I see Kathy Schlaughter on here. She was one of those folks. Brian Eden has from Heat Smart Tompkins has perspective on this as well. And our own Jay Franklin actually has been pretty involved in this conversation over the years too. So with that intro, I just wanted to, how about Kathy, would you like to start with what you see as kind of the issues here and possible benefits or pitfalls?
Sure, there's probably many, but just a couple that always come to mind is that code enforcement is extremely uneven in the county. We understand that the municipalities that have very, very part-time code enforcement officers, and that there are, other issues frequently that come into play when it is, done by each municipality is doing it differently. I think there are some issues that come about equity about reporting code violations, that if there was one place one could do that and one could do it fairly anonymously, that might help move some bad situations along without people fearing that they would have reprisals or repercussions for speaking up about code violations. I think there are, there are many, many apartments that do not have certificate of occupancies that are, out of compliance. I think there's just a lot of good to be gained by, having kind of a uniform code enforcement for the county, and having renters understand what they can expect from whatever kind of certification comes, or being able to say that, this apartment or this rental unit meets code, and understanding what that means. So there's probably lots of other reasons, but I'd be happy to let other people talk about it too.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And let me also say, we started this meeting with my telling Lisa how I understood how much was going on in county government right now. And I see Katie popped up too. I know that the planning department, which is still not fully staffed, has concerns about workload. Broad picture here is this is a conversation, and I wanted to see if there's a way to move the conversation forward. And, we're not doing this tomorrow. So I just want to allay any staff concerns on that side. Brian, do you want to take a shot? I know.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Martha. I hope you'll tolerate at least 3 minutes of my reflection on these issues. Heat Smart Tompkins since 2015 has been working on enhancing building performance, both through the energy efficiency of the building envelope, air sealing and insulation, as well as using high energy efficiency heating and cooling systems. And so, I've worked with contractors and code enforcement officials I, have some of the same experiences that Kathy just reflected on. So I support a study of the potential benefits of at least a hybrid system. There are things that are inherently municipal oriented, setbacks, things like that. But, I think there are benefits here, a more uniform application of the codes across the municipalities, advanced training. Our codes are becoming more complex and evolving, and opportunities for specialization to address the more technically challenging codes. New York State has adopted a greenhouse gas emission reduction goal of 85% by 2050. And that means that all existing buildings will have to be zero emission buildings by 2050 to make that goal. The other 15% will be made up of commercial and industrial applications that are not easily electrified. So this requires, a lot of coordination and communication between and especially on larger buildings, architects, engineers, contractors, code enforcers, and auditors that make sure that the buildings are commissioned to meet the standards that they're certified to do, LEED or Energy Star, NYSERDA Energy Star. So HVAC systems are not plug and play. The equipment may be efficient, but the installations and the system design has a lot of influence on how efficiently they perform. And as you know, Martha, I've been in touch with you the last couple of months on the environmental justice aspect of code enforcement and making sure that the LMI community has an opportunity to live in the safe and comfortable and healthy housing that a lot of our market rate housing folks are having right now. And we've been involved in new codes, the unified solar permitting code when we did 400 rooftop installations in Tompkins County in 2014. There was only the building code, and there wasn't much guidance for municipal code enforcers. So that system was developed. We've been working on a geothermal system installation code. It's very complicated. It'll probably end up being the best practice guidance systems. So, and we know that the Climate Action Council at the state level, as well as the legislature, is looking at both codes and also appliance standards. So, I think, this would be a huge conversation. There's a lot of different moving parts here. I'd be glad to continue to participate in such a discussion. And we certainly can't do it here, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, we're just starting to understand, why this is an issue we should take time with. So thank you for that. Jay, would you like to chime in?
Yep. Hey, everyone. How you doing? I think this is a timely conversation. If we didn't consolidate as a county-wide assessing unit 51 years ago, we'd be in the same situation. So doing a consolidated office will bring everything Brian talked about. The same, we would be dealing with retirements. I think the average age of an assessor in New York State's over 70. So we'd be in the same boat. Having a countywide office, you could standardize that approach. People can be cross-trained in multiple municipalities. A countywide office would make the code officer accessible. We get a lot of phone calls from other assessors because they can't find them. And if you have part-time code officers at 20 hours a week or whatever, during those 20 hours, they're out doing inspections. So it's hard to catch them. And as Brian said, to be able to specialize. If you can get a pool of people, you can get people who are specialized in certain categories of construction and they know what it is. The same thing my office does. So I think this is timely, something that we should look at. And we're still all local. That's one of the biggest complaints that I see or I hear about when people talk about consolidating a function at the county level. We're still local. We still know the roads. We still know the people. We know too much about people, actually. So I wish I didn't know as much, but this is timely, and however we can help support looking into this, I think it's an opportunity for growth.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. And just one more, Johanna Anderson from INHS. You took your put your camera on. Did you want to talk on this topic? I know you're here for the next one.
No, we're fine with the next one. Thank you though, Martha.
Okay, thanks, Johanna. Committee members, or Katie or Lisa, if you have comments first before committee.
Sure, I would just add that it's a big problem, particularly in the surrounding counties. There are counties that have no code enforcement at all right now. It's really becoming an emerging issue. I would say, the interesting part is teasing out between building code enforcement and zoning code enforcement, because each municipality has their own zoning code. So that's where I think the sticking point often happens between local and county. I did have a long conversation with the planning director from Broome County, and admittedly their study was done in 2011 by the same CGR company, and she said it's a very valuable study. Their study didn't go anywhere because the demand for it did not come from the municipalities. And she felt that was a pretty critical aspect of this whole thing, is that municipalities really need to be asking the county to do this and interested in it, or it doesn't really go anywhere. And unfortunately, Martha, I just heard from Elaine Jardine down in Tioga County that it is not looking promising that they're going to fund her request. So just wanted to update people on that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Katie. And as far as the municipalities, this did come up at TCAT several years ago. So it's something, and a code officer, I think it was Brooke Greenhouse who was then with Caroline, brought it up, similar points that CJ was making. So I think TCOG would kind of be a next step for the conversation. I've got Annie and then Henry. Go ahead, Annie.
Thanks, Martha. So I know you and I have talked about this for a couple of years, and so I'm really glad we're now talking about it at this committee. As a semi-retired home inspector, I see various levels of enforcement around the county, and so of course it's very hard, especially for people who are renting, to have consistently safe places to live. So I'm really glad that we're going to look at this, as far as an equity issue, as far as people purchasing homes. It's a really big issue when renovations are being done, or when additions are being put on. A lot of contractors have talked to me about the difference in trying to work in the different municipalities, when not only are there different codes, but the enforcement of it and the communication can really be a huge barrier. So I'm really glad that we're bringing this forward today. So thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Henry.
Yes, I've only dealt with the code enforcement in the city of Ithaca, and I know that the city of Ithaca basically doesn't have enough code enforcement. They don't have enough people to literally do things. So I wonder how going countywide, I know that you'll be able to get expertise, but will you have to hire more code enforcers over time to basically cover the entire county? Or is it just the magic of Jay about, combining them basically proves more than less?
I'll take a stab at this. About 10 years ago, we also studied consolidated courts and the idea of taking the town courts and creating a bigger district for that administration of justice. It would have relieved the towns of their expenses and brought the administration of justice into one centralized area, and so it would have cost the county more, but relieved the municipalities. Same thing with the health insurance consortium. Same thing with assessment. Obviously, the towns aren't paying for assessment. We've professionalized it. We have absorbed that function within the county. Probably assessment is probably the best example or an analogy here. So I would I would foresee that if you assembled all the pieces of code enforcers and say how many full-time people is that, maybe it would add up to the same number. I don't know, but that's the sort of thing that this a study like the CGR study would take a look at. And they do a really nice job in this study of saying what the different flavors are, where you could, some efficiencies are gained just by having a similar platform for record keeping that everybody uses, shared training. You can absorb at the county level, so just the fire code, or you could take on the whole energy code as well. I mean, there are different layers of how much centralization you might take on. So I'm not saying like I have like the answer here. That would be the reason to do this kind of a study where, for example, CGR interviewed the municipal leaders in Tioga County. They surveyed the code officers themselves. So that's the sort of conversation that, we should evolve that would take into account our own municipal desires and abilities. They may be ready to hand it off, or they may really want to keep it in-house. And in fact, it wouldn't have to be the same for each municipality either.
Okay. So
Okay.
are you thinking about doing something during budget season, Martha?
Oh, I don't know, Henry. I mean, yeah, it's timely to do that. And, let's go to Shauna first and see if Mike has anything to add. But then, if we want to go forward, let's talk about what that would look like. Shauna?
Okay.
Thank you. I know that many of us have been in the room and had the conversation of municipal versus county code enforcement. And, it kind of comes full circle as to if in fact we have code enforcement that has different regulations or different rules, are we going to be losing some of our housing inventory? Obviously, the one thing that's concerning is that we certainly have housing right now that is absolutely substandard. And I think everyone on this call can agree to that. But I want to make sure that we also talk about like the unintended consequences of not having that housing available. And what is that going to look like? Or, if for some reason we were to do code enforcement and let's just say 20 apartments are taken off the market because of new code enforcement rules, where does that leave us at the end of the day? And I'm not saying I'm not willing to do it because of that, but I just want to make sure that we have the conversation at the forefront of our decision here. Yes, it's substandard housing, but right now we don't have an alternative other than putting people up in the shelter. And so I just want to make sure that that is also part of this conversation.
Absolutely. I think that's something that would be part of any study. Let's go to Mike. Henry, did you have your hand up again or just?
That's weird.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I actually have to disagree with that. There's one thing about, substandard housing. It's another thing that doesn't meet code. I mean, if it doesn't meet code, it's illegal. It's literally shut down housing. Whether we can't have people living in housing that doesn't have fire alarms, for example. I mean, that's how people die. So
we do.
Well, then that's why maybe we're looking at this code enforcement right now. But to say that, that may result in lost housing, well, I guess so. But that landlord, then that housing is off the rolls. I mean, that's not actual housing. So, yeah, I guess we can look at it, but that to me isn't a barrier to not doing this. I mean, that's actually more of an impetus to do it, not the other way around.
All right, thanks, Mike. Leslie?
Thanks. Appreciate the conversation. I can imagine this will be challenging to move something that resides at the municipal level where land use authority resides up to the county. The coordination of that and thinking about the kind of separate worlds of zoning and building code, as Katie said, and yet all of those come together in any given project So dicing that out will be challenging. To Henry's question, the answer is yes. We need to hire more code enforcement. Right now, we need to hire more code enforcement. Right now, we have people retiring. Most municipalities have something that's less than full-time or less than they could probably use. For the municipalities that are seeing increased development pressure, they're constantly looking for more, even when they have full-time professional staff. Yes, to Jay's point, all of the codes are getting a lot more complex. Recent fire code has really made some big impacts on projects that are going up, some of our larger projects that go up. So the big downtown developments and large housing developments create real pressures on code enforcement officials to be on site all the time during a multi-year project. You know, that takes them away from every other project that they need to be looking at and reviewing. So depending on our growth trajectory, I would say we'd need to be thinking about code enforcement to track that. And that doesn't even begin to get into the conversation Mike and Sean are just having about existing, housing stock or building stock that's substandard. So it's a big undertaking. I think having a study to think about all of these issues and projecting into the next, say, 10-year plus timeframe for what we think development might look like would help frame that out, as well as looking at frankly, the current age of our code enforcement officials that are always, that are in the last few years that I've seen are either near retirement or coming out of retirement to take a part-time code enforcement role. So we definitely need to think about workforce development training opportunities for young folks to get into this too.
Thank you, Leslie. Annie and then Henry.
Thank you. So one of the things that I'm hearing as we're going around is who needs to be at the table as we discuss this. And I know, when we talked about, okay, TCAT is the place, but I'm thinking that there's a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of different organizations that need to be at the table to start to initially talk about this, including TCAG, people who provide housing assistance, people from different ethnic groups, code enforcement officials, because we certainly don't want to, a landlord association, we certainly don't want to all of a sudden start doing code checks on apartments that haven't been checked by a code official in years, which is often the case. And then all of a sudden that person who lives there is put out on the street. So I'd really like to think about that as we start of who needs to be at the table as we start these discussions. Thank you.
Good points, Annie. Thank you. Henry?
Yeah, and the final point, I know Kathy Slaughter talked about the code enforcement. I know when I first started running, people on South Hill were basically given the choice of, okay, stay in substandard housing or get the code enforcement and then get kicked out. And so that's a concern. Also, as we lead into our next topic, the apartments that Sean is talking about, maybe apartments in Groton, for say, that formerly incarcerated people have to go to because it's the only amount that collects the rent that they get from DSS. And so, again, if we get rid of those apartments, where do those people stay? Maybe at Sunflower House, maybe at the shelters. And so, I mean, again, these are all topics that we need to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. Need to discuss the pros and cons, the way, what's the process of rolling this out. All right, Mike, and then I'll finish up so we can move on. Go ahead, Mike.
I just want to reiterate, if it doesn't pass code, you're not actually allowed to collect rent on it. It is an illegal property. So unless we want to address the code itself, what we're basically talking about is not enforcing the code and saying and turning a blind eye to it. And I don't think that's what we want. So I appreciate what everybody's saying, but yeah, if I have an apartment and it doesn't pass code inspection, I'm not allowed to collect rent. I'm not allowed to have people there. So I appreciate that people are saying, well, people are going to lose their housing, but it's not actual housing. It's, it's an illegal property.
But it's
Yeah.
places where people are living. People
Yeah,
are already
understand.
living there, yeah.
The way this came up in my mind was several years ago, the Human Services Coalition did a list of, and Kathy, you can help me if I've gotten this wrong, kind of what should be the basic things that all apartments, all housing units have, sort of a bottom line safety code. And the reason they came up with it was that they knew of so many units that didn't have windows that closed, doors that locked, hot water, reliable heat. I don't think any of us think that that's acceptable. Now, so the issue about a uniform code is that then it's a level playing field. The good landlords, so-called good landlords, are already doing that, already providing that kind of housing. Other landlords, I won't say bad, other landlords are skating by without being expected to meet those minimums. So this is about raising the floor for everybody. And it's about being consistent, it's about being equitable, it's about being fair. I think that any humane or rational way of rolling something out like this would have grace periods. Okay, you've got 6 months to fix this thing or that thing, or 3 months or 1 month, depending upon the severity. So I just want to say, I think I have heard the concerns about what if we lose housing units. I actually think it's probably more likely that most of those units that are now substandard will see pressure, those landlords will see pressure to actually make the units habitable. That's the goal, obviously. I just want 2 other things, then I see your hand, Johanna. I'd love to have you weigh in. According to the CGR report, for the most part, fees can pay for at least a large part of the service. It's a fee for service program. It's not just straight on the tax roll. It's a service that's used same as our environmental health department inspects septic systems. So there's a fee for that service. And that's one of the things that CGR can look at, or I won't say CGR, any consultant would look at. I've also seen in this report, they talk about how the lack of inspectors actually holds up projects from getting finished or from moving along. And Leslie talked about that, where you've got, we need housing to be developed. If code inspectors are a reason that projects don't proceed timely, that's something we should pay attention to, and that really can hurt our housing market. So I, really would, and as far as the people who should be involved in the conversation, absolutely, Andy, you've got, a good list there, and we would make sure to do that. One final thing, what department might this go under? Tioga County was proposing the health department. 8 counties right now in New York State do have some level of countywide code enforcement, and there's a mix of what department gets carried out in. So there are a lot of different ways to skin that cat. Johanna, want to wrap us up with this?
Thank you so much. I think it's actually a great discussion, and I think it's important. We are very appreciative of having assessment all under one house, and having code enforcement under one house would certainly make the work that we do much simpler. That said, I definitely understand that there could be a little bit of hesitancy, because if you set new standards, a lot of people may not have the financial wherewithal to be able to meet those standards. And we want to make sure that landlords still have the ability to collect rent if they're providing safe housing. I would encourage the county to continue to use programs like CDBG rehab to help low-income homeowners bring their properties up to code, which we're doing that right now in partnership with Tompkins County, and we really appreciate that program. There are other opportunities for investment properties where you can do low-income loans to help landlords bring their properties up to code. So those are just a couple of things that I would encourage exploring as well.
Thank you, Johanna. I think let's add INHS to that list of people who should be in the conversation. Appreciate those very practical suggestions. I think the next item, we'll move to the next item in a second. As for the committee, CJ Randall couldn't come this month. I've asked her to put next month's HED meeting on the calendar. I can check with the co-chairs of TCOG and see if we can have a discussion there. As far as, and Henry, you point out this is budget season. If this is the sort of the time that we need to get something something on the books, maybe even, an allocation that goes into the contingent fund to be, to be worked out. I personally would welcome support for that kind of an idea. I can talk to Katie about that or Jay about that, after this, and we can see where else it would go. If I'm sensing that the committee would support taking this another step or two. Is that true? Committee, nod, shake your head. One. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and take it farther. I really appreciate this conversation, and we will work on this and see if we can do this, to get this going this year. All right, thank you all so very much. Next, let's turn to Sunflower House, and you folks already have a great press office going on. I've seen something in the media this morning already. This is something, this project is something that actually Johanna mentioned in her list of projects that INHS is working on, back in June or May when you came to the committee. I would just open it up to who would like to take the first step on presenting this. We are a little bit behind, so let's be, people have your written materials. If you want to just make a quick summary, would that be Deb or Tali?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. Yeah, I think those students who came before just knocked it out the park. I guess they've been doing their research, as they say. But anyway, coming to you guys, just to reiterate, I guess, what this is all about, right? So URO, organization that I represent, has really been looking at this issue of housing, really drilling down on it since about 2018. What the students kind of alluded to was the fact that we partnered, URO partnered with an Engage Cornell project, Engage Cornell, Engage IC, with professors from both IC, Ithaca College and Cornell, organizing students to kind of research and find out what were those critical elements to reducing recidivism and increasing the vitality of the folks who are going through recidivism, as well as the community. Those key elements that we found even prior to the study, what the study is going to show and is due to be released this fall, early winter, really shows that housing is that key barrier in our community, that key barrier that prevents folks from actually transitioning into the community in a safe and helpful way, due to the myriad of obstacles and challenges that they have to overcome in order to actually get into a place where they can feel settled and feel like they can go about the business of getting their lives back together. And so housing and human connection, as I said, were those key elements that reduced recidivism. We found that these types of initiatives were very prevalent in the South and the Midwest, because these places had housing, lower cost housing, and these projects were often kind of commingled with interfaith-based organizations, churches really set these things up so that folks could have the transitional support with people and with housing that they needed. And so, our research is drilled down on it, really going to show that, the housing is that key element and piece. And so, with the CGR, so Martha alluded to the CGR study that you guys are looking at in the previous topic, but we also had a CGR study of incarceration here in Tompkins. And so with that study, we were able to actually look at what the recommendations were and really reduce recidivism in a major way here, reduced our average jail population from in the 80s to down in the 40s and 50s. And then what we find is that there's some frequent flyers, and then there's the folks who are on parole, who are technical violators or violation because of this barrier of housing. And so we know that if we can tackle this specific population of parolee and court-involved folks, that we can, significantly reduce the population by 10 to 20, taking us down to about 10 to 20 on an average in our jail.
Okay, Polly.
Yeah.
I feel badly. I want to really make sure we have time for questions from committee members.
I'm getting down. I'm getting to the end. So, I mean, you guys have the proposal. I'm pretty sure we've sent the proposal to everyone. Deb has already kind of applied for some funding, but Paula will go into the specifics of the funding, and Richard will talk. I guess we could just get into the numbers if that's what you're.
Tell you what, let's go to committee questions, because I really do think, we do have a good amount of material here. We'll probably, if there's anything we don't get to that you want to cover after I give the committee a chance to ask questions, then then we'll come back to you. So committee, maybe you don't have any questions, but anybody?
And we have a team here, by the way. So Richard Rivera, Deb Dietrich, and Dr. Paul Ionide is here.
Great. Okay, Henry.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering how the governor signing the Less is More Act, do you think that will impact the population for this housing?
Richard, you want to take that one?
I can quickly try to address it. I have a terrible connection here, so forgive me. I think we're excited about less is more. I mean, we're excited that there won't be as many technical violations. That's a really good, point. On the other hand, we know that many of our parolees will continue to live in substandard housing. And this is like, they will put 12 more bedrooms, make them available so people will be near the city core. And so less is more is positive, and more housing to this population is positive. So I don't see any negatives coming from that.
Henry, I thought about that as well. I think it changes the financial calculation here. I don't think we'll see people incarcerated for technical violations, but it doesn't solve the housing problem. So
I don't, and I might add, it won't change the calculation. Nothing will change the calculation in the jail because the budget is fixed and linked to capacity and not to service delivery. But the behaviors that will lead an individual to receive it in the first place, had the Less is More Act not been passed, will still exist. Our job at Sunflower House and the wraparound services that we were providing would be to reduce those stresses that generally lead to those technical violations had they existed. So the behavior doesn't change. What changes is the authority of the parole officer to violate an individual for technical violations, but still the idleness, the stressors that exist that lead an individual to get technically violated in the first place will still exist, and the Sunflower Houses and the corresponding programs will reduce that.
thank you, Richard. Thank you, Deb. Annie?
Thank you. I know it has been brought up that, possibly the numbers, the calculations for the cost savings in the jail might not quite be what is estimated here in this study because of minimum staffing standards. But still, I think financially, it's the right thing to do, but way more importantly, ethically and morally, it's the right thing to do. We know that. I worked for many years in drug and alcohol rehab, and one of my jobs was to help people with the transition out into the community. And we know in a huge transition like that, that's, especially without housing, without resources, that's the most vulnerable time. So I definitely will support this, and I'm so glad that you guys are doing this. As Cosimo said earlier, I don't know if I'm phrasing this correctly as he said it, but in this community, why aren't we already doing that? But one good thing about this community is people say that often. Well, if we're doing this, why aren't we doing this also? So let's keep doing these type of programs, and I'm really glad that you guys have done the legwork to make this happen.
If I could go to Johanna, I see your hand, Paola. If I can go to Johanna first, and I really hate to try to rush through this. I did hear that you had a long conversation at the Public Safety Committee as well. So that's great. You're really educating the whole legislature. Johanna, your part, let me go through the numbers here just a minute that are in the proposal. In the OAR, OAR puts in a request every year through the Human Services Coalition, and that's reviewed and So I looked at what's in our budget book. This proposal now that's coming to us is late in terms of our budget process. But I looked in our budget book to see, well, what does OAR already have in there? And Deb helped me clarify. Right now, it's OAR number 54 for $50,000 for a parolee / housing case manager. And Deb, you said that was, that was before this proposal was fully baked. Right. So in a sense, and that 50,000 was approved by the Human Services Coalition and approved by the county administrator. So 50 of this whole proposal is already in our budget. Right. This proposal would plus up that case manager to a 60,000 position and add, there were, for the housing manager, including fringes and other things, 76,000. There's 35 for the URO programming. So in a sense, 50 of the 111 that's in this proposal is already in the administrator's budget. What's not included are the costs for the actual housing to rehab or whatever needs to be done. So Johanna, if you could go, Paula writes that the total request that remains is 61,320, not including the housing part. Mm-hmm. So Johanna, do you want to take a few minutes and tell us what that price would be from INHS's point of view? Okay, so in September of 2020, INHS purchased the two properties for a total of $578,000. And we began immediately on rehabbing all of the units. Laura Lee Morrow, our Director of Construction Services, who's here with me, she was in charge of that project. In total, the capital improvements that we put into these were just shy of $137,000. We received our certificate of completion in late May. And so for the past 5 months, these buildings have been sitting empty because shortly before we finished completion of them, that's when we began talking with OAR and URO and getting really excited about this location. So we decided we'll hold them offline. So we have not been collecting any income on these. Right now, as of this morning, we've spent just over $825,000 holding these units. We had planned initially to rent these out at 100% AMI. In doing that, each unit would collect just over $2,200 a month in rent.
By moving forward with Sunflower House, it's actually, if you look at it in total, it's reducing the gross potential rent income for INHS by $52,800 per year. That is a lot of money, but we also believe so much in the importance of this program. And the fact that, you know, nothing like this to this scale has really been done. So I'm very excited to see what kind of an impact it's going to have after 3 years. I feel very strong about this mainly because of the strength of our partners. OAR has been doing this at the Endeavor House for many years and doing it successfully. URO has a great reputation in the area and is incredibly knowledgeable about this. So I feel very, very confident in doing this.
So your request, what would your request be as part of this project? The 52,800 per year for 3 years to even out to support the rent?
Yes, because at this point, because it does not have any cash flow, we don't have any reserves. And, you know, while we did put in $137,000 worth of work to bring these up to our standards, you never know what could happen in the future. There's always that need.
Okay, thank you very much. Paula, very briefly, and then we have to figure out where this goes next.
I just wanted to emphasize that it is virtually impossible to find safe, affordable housings that are centrally located at below the DSS $400 emergency rate. Your only options, if you're a person in reentry, are the homeless shelter, Norfee apartments, which are essentially substandard and run into many of the code violation issues that you all mentioned before, or essentially living unhoused in places like the jungle. So this will have a huge impact on the homeless shelter in terms of reducing the burden on that. It would also have an impact on the homeless encampments in the jungle. And crucially, right, the centrally located alleviates people from having to deal with the transportation issues that they have if they move further out in the rural locations. And this is why this is sort of, I want to sort of emphasize how unprecedented it is that we actually have found this partnership with INHS at this below DSS emergency housing rate, which is the only subsidized housing available to many of the people in reentry, versus like long 2-year waiting lists for Section 8 housing and other supportive living houses.
I totally agree. Absolutely. It checks all those boxes. So my one concern is kind of our process issue. It would have been great if we'd had this in the system as part of the whole budget. So we have to figure out how do we add add to the 50,000 that has been approved. And I guess I would ask committee members if there's a sense that we should and I'd be willing to work with this team to figure out what kind of additional OT, whether it's member filed OTR or how we do that. Or would that come out of the recovery fund that we're talking about, or how we do that? If committee is supportive of this project, I'd be willing to work with them to figure out the right process. Your thoughts? Thumbs up from Henry, Shauna, Annie. Okay, Mike. Okay, all right, terrific. So wish we had more time to delve into this. I agree with you about when Johanna mentioned this back a couple of months ago, like my ears really perked up. What a great idea. So because Deb had bravely, courageously dived into the housing rehab field to do Endeavor House, and we're glad she survived. So
far.
Yeah, so far. So, all right. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Wish we had more time. Committee, thank you for your support on that. And we'll follow up. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
You bet. Thank you for bringing us here.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks. Okay, Katie, how we doing? Commissioners report. I guess, are there any committee member reports? Or is that a few minutes we can save on the agenda? Okay, all right, thanks, guys. Katie, hello.
Great.
You're up.
Hi, everybody. I have a pretty brief report on my end. Basically, I, as you all know, went out on disability in early August. I returned to work on September 13th, but I did want to let everyone know that I am only returning to work half-time through now mid-October. So it's a substantial hit on our department, and kudos to Megan and the crew for moving things forward, but it has complicated things, especially during this important time with so many new proposals being discussed. But we're trying to stay with our heads above water, but I did want to make sure people knew that was going on. We have started interviewing for the senior planner with a focus on energy and sustainability, and those interviews are proceeding nicely. We're hopeful that we'll find a great candidate. And today we are going to be bringing you as part of the broadband discussion. I'd like to cede a little bit of my time to that discussion because we've tried to lay out for you some of the options and paths moving forward that the county might consider taking as kind of a preliminary discussion on that topic. And I know Megan has a number of housing related issues to update you on as well. So I am going to turn it over to Megan for that update.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you. And we're glad you're back and sorry that it hasn't, you haven't fully healed. So
thank you.
And I will aim to be super quick, but just a few quick updates on the housing front. Tomorrow's the groundbreaking on the Asteria and Conference Center project. And along with that, with a tie-in, we've got a Homes and Community Renewal Commissioner coming. And so hoping to have a conversation that there's been a subcommittee of the Community Housing Development Fund's Oversight Committee working on kind of next steps for the program. And so we're going to use that opportunity. And I expect that that group will be meeting again, the full Oversight Committee this fall to plan out the next funding round and tweaks to the program to hopefully keep affordable housing rolling forward. Along with that, I'm happy to share news that a couple Sundays ago, the Habitat for Humanity had their ribbon cutting for one of their new homes on Slaterville Road. And so a family moved in with 3 very excited children picking out their new rooms and things. And there's a big thanks to the county, the city, and Cornell, because the Community Housing Development Fund, it has been the single largest contributor to all 3 of the homes Habitat's working on there. So now 2 are occupied and they're waiting on materials for the 3rd. So hopefully that will be finished up before too long. And then finally, although we had thought we would be adding an extra resolution to your agenda today to hold a public hearing on a community development block grant application because the state dropped a new housing activity round. INHS staff and county staff met by phone with Homes and Community Renewal staff, and they advised against submitting for this application round. Instead suggested they think there might be a new opportunity New York State has not tried before that we could be a guinea pig for, since we often fill that role with them. So we're going to work with their staff over the winter to see if that's a viable idea. They think it's something that HUD would allow because they're understanding that the way our, especially for sale housing market is right now is making typical CDBG funding not particularly viable. Our housing prices are getting too high, too competitive, and we still have an open rehab grant we're working with INHS on, as well as the health department has just rolled out their septic replacement program. So we'll probably be coming to you and hopefully having that idea together for the 2022 round, which they think will roll out earlier in 2022.
Megan, what would that be? What's that for?
It's a little complicated. So the 2022 would be a housing activities round, and typically that's limited to home buyer assistance for first-time home buyers, rehab, which can include well and septic as well. But they're understanding that there's some limits in terms of how much we can actually subsidize. And our housing prices are starting to become difficult with that. And with rehab, we're limited to owner occupied properties. We were hoping to expand into permanent affordability. And unfortunately, the HUD rules do not allow us to do rehab into the community housing trust or things that would lock into permanent affordability. So we'd be exploring another option, since INHS is a CDFI, a community development finance institution, I'm getting that acronym right, that they could actually serve as the first lender instead of, in home buying assistance, we're typically the second lender. And so we might be able to help people that would have trouble with that, getting that first lender on board. And so that's something we're going to explore. And if we are a successful guinea pig, it's something that other counties could also pick up on.
Well, we're always game for trying new things. And in fact, you often come up with new things that then they pick up and say, oh, that's a great idea. All right, that sounds intriguing. Thank you, Megan. Anything else? Questions for Katie and Megan? Committee? Annie?
I just wanted to say welcome back, Katie, part-time. I hesitated to email you anything because I know I didn't want to put extra burden on you for having to reply to anything, but we also did want to make as many different changes in the county and new proposals while you were away, knowing that it would be harder for you to respond. So Martha and I were scheming about that, and Mike and Henry and Shauna. So, but now the cat's out of the bag, so to speak. So.
Well, you've all done a remarkable job at that, so thank you.
I think we took the recovery fund off your plate, though.
Maybe.
Well, just keep hiring people, Katie. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Anything else for Katie or Megan or for the department? Okay, very good. Thank you all. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Katie. Next up is the IAD report. And I don't see anybody from IAED here, unless I'm wrong. I didn't expect them that they would necessarily be here for a report, but if there are any questions, I can certainly forward them on. Mike and I were at IAED board meeting yesterday, where one item of interest was the water and sewer study that's been going on. It was first done 10, maybe 12 years ago, and they've been doing, TG Miller's has been doing an update for like 2 years. And so Heather said she's really kind of getting impatient with it, and is really hoping that there will be a wrap up of that study, very important update on that study by the end of this year. So I just wanted to let people know that that's on the horizon. So any questions on their written report? Okay, thank you very much. Then Nick, we are up to you. Nick Helmholt. Where are you, Nick? I see your black box.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. There we go.
Oh, great. There's the video. Okay.
Now we can see you too. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for being
Good morning.
Here.
Yeah.
So we have a couple things. First is our tourism update. Want to go for it?
Yeah, we'll keep this pretty brief. There's not a huge amount to say in this report, but just a quick update that we do our bi-monthly report. Our data that we look at hotel performance, most recent information is showing that this is like the first time we're starting to come back to 2019 levels post COVID. So that's very exciting. We're starting to see that hotel performance is looking a lot more robust. We are waiting to see that play out in our next quarterly room tax report. I don't have that yet, but expect that in early October from the finance department. So we'll see how those stack up. Of course, this is all put with a big asterisk that we don't know what will happen, in the future, and that there are still people who are, considering changing or, delaying plans of travel because of COVID. Nobody knows what the future holds, but right now things are looking okay. we are still convening the Tourism Recovery Committee and focusing on labor shortage issues. I put some figures in the briefing there just so you can kind of get a sense of where that is at this point, in terms of how the labor market in that sector compares to where it was in 2019. So it's certainly not the only part of our economy, our labor market that's been affected by this, but a pretty substantial effect there is being felt. A couple other just quick updates. CVB Downtown Visitor Center is back up and running at normal hours. So you can swing down there Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 5. That is due to the funding that was approved earlier this year through this committee and through the legislature. And another piece of that is the Community Celebrations Grant. We received 8 applications. And the committee is meeting next week to review those, and we expect we'll have a slate of awards to bring back to HED next month for consideration. And we just recently opened up the Acod grant award for 2022 as well. This is a longer process because there's a pre-application, sort of an eligibility filter that we use for this grant, where organizations that are interested in that go through a pre-application before they get to the full application to save them the time in case they aren't, wouldn't meet that criteria. Yeah, other than that, you have the rest of the report. I think basically the tables in here are the same tables that were in the last report. Nothing material has changed in terms of expenditures or room tax collected. Happy to take any questions relating to tourism.
Thanks very much, Nick. Committee, any questions or comments? Henry.
Yes, Nick, are the labor numbers still affecting the hospitality industry?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's affecting the ability for hotels to keep rooms clean and open. It's affecting the ability for restaurants to have tables that are available and hours that are available. It's certainly at that point now where I think we're seeing that as potentially the primary driver of any shortfall we're seeing in the sector is due to inability to deliver on the supplier side, on the hotels, restaurants, and so forth.
Thank you.
I know we're used to figures that have a lag of a month or two, and I see this says in July, the labor force was down by 900 workers compared to 2019. I will mention that at this IAED meeting yesterday, Kathy Hart, is she the Marriott?
Yeah, she's Marriott, I believe, general manager, but
General manager. She said that they are now fully staffed, and she was very excited about that. She said with a lot of new personnel. So, let's hope things are picking up.
Right, and it's important to note this is not just the segment here is leisure and hospitality, so it's not just hotels, it's not just restaurants. There's a few other things kind of in that mix as well. So,
right. Okay, that sounds looking good, and we're really, really happy that money's being put to good use that we passed over the summer. Anything else for Nick on tourism? All right, thank you so much. Then let's turn to broadband.
Yes.
To talk about.
So, if it's all right with you, Martha, could we go with the resolution first and then do the discussion following that?
Good idea. So that was the resolution that was added. Document 10384, title Releasing Municipal and School District Contributions to the Tompkins County Broadband Study and Replacing the Other Government's Contributions to the County with the Use of Fund Balance. Does somebody want to move that? Henry moves, Annie seconds. So discussion. Nick, are there any questions, or folks know what this is all about and ready to vote? Think we're ready to vote. Okay. All in favor, let's see. Henry?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, and that's unanimous with gratitude to the municipalities for their involvement, but we got it from here. So basically, all right, go ahead, Nick.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So as Katie mentioned a moment ago, we've sort of taken an attempt at really laying out what we see as the options and paths forward for broadband. So if it's all right with you, I'm going to do a screen share here so you can see a presentation that I've put together on this. Let's see if this works. Okay, do you see the presentation?
Yeah, it's not in presentation mode yet,
All right,
but
all right, that's the next trick. Let's see if that works. That's always where.
you find slideshow or there you go. Looks good.
Good. Okay. Okay, great. So just so really the goal here for this discussion, the reason we wanted to have this on the agenda is to present paths forward for broadband expansion, so that the legislature here can provide some guidance to Department of Planning and Sustainability on our next steps. I think just a little bit of quick background. We got the first component of the Fujitsu market assessment. That market assessment was the first component of their study back in June. It showed, a small number, numbering between roughly, depending on how you divided it up, 270 to 470 homes that were counted as unserved in the county. And this was a much smaller number than I think we had expected to find. So in light of that, and in understanding that there were limitations on that data, we asked Fujitsu to pause that study while we considered some alternative options. And those were really talking to the existing internet service providers in the area to see what their willingness was to expand their service, their networks to reach those areas. And in doing so, that was what led to the discussions over the past few meetings regarding the Point Broadband Newfield expansion. But it's also led to other discussions that are still ongoing with the other internet service providers, and in learning more about what they're willing to build out. In parallel with that, there was a grant application that was put in by Southern Tier 8 to the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, to build out underserved areas in multiple counties, including Tompkins. And we understand there are 213 homes that would be potentially covered should that grant be awarded in Tompkins County. No match would be required, and we won't know the results of that application until later this fall, around mid-November. There's kind of a couple of parallel efforts that are happening here relating to broadband, and we're starting to get information back from the internet service providers, and we're also getting feedback about, both from the Tompkins County Council of Governments Broadband Committee, and from various meetings that have happened over the last month or so relating to the Point Broadband Newfield expansion. So we wanted to sort of take a step back and say, what are the real paths forward here to move forward? So that's where we're at. So I'll just lay out what we found and kind of where we think the pros and cons of each one of these options are for the county. So option number one would be to resume the Fujitsu broadband study. We only have one of the four components of this study. There were three more deliverables that were, expected from this. The full study, the benefits of completing this full study would give the county an estimated cost for a potential method to expand broadband coverage, primarily in the southern border of the county, southern region, the three towns that, Newfield, Danby, and Caroline, primarily. The implementation for this full study would really expand the broadband competition and provide a long-term solution for that portion of the county. On the downside, this study, we expect the recommendations will be pretty expensive, and could be challenging to finance with the existing federal sources because there are so few homes that are currently eligible for that federal funding as identified in the market assessment. The other piece is that this would not necessarily even cover all of the homes that are unserved, as there are very small pockets that were not captured in the market assessment of homes that exist in other towns in the county that do not have service. These are homes that don't meet the criteria needed to be on the FCC broadband maps. So pros and cons to resuming the study. As you might have guessed, the second option is to stop the broadband study. So we've gotten a part of the study, and it has value and utility on its own. So there may be consideration here to stop the study where we are right now. Expenses incurred today are just shy of $24,000. So in consideration of the resolution that was just passed, assuming that's taken up by the full legislature, that would allow the county to have an additional $35,000 of approved county funding available to repurpose potentially for broadband. So stopping the study would free up some funding to do something else. On the flip side, stopping the study would leave unanswered questions regarding this middle mile fiber solution that would not be addressed. So certainly some clear downsides to that. The third option here is something that's come up a few times in various meetings that we want to raise and kind of formally present as a thought to consider, is to perform a physical survey of fixed broadband infrastructure. This would basically entail a consultant driving the primarily rural areas of the county to determine where endpoints of fixed broadband exist. This is a cable and fiber only. This will not be able to assess whether somebody has access to a fixed wireless service or a satellite service. This is only going to be looking at cable and fiber infrastructure. We have kind of gotten some preliminary costing on this. We expect the cost would run between $15,000 and $25,000 for a study of this sort, and it would result in a map that we would have really detailed street level information about where broadband exists at a very distinct point in time. So the benefit is that we'd have that information and we could share it and we could use it to inform any future decisions on broadband. The downside is that it is pretty, it doesn't have a great shelf life. The information could be out of date, within weeks or months as internet service providers change expand their service. So we would, would have to be acted on relatively quickly if it were to be of real value. The fourth option here is in line with what we've discussed earlier and have begun to do here with the Newfield project, is to incentivize internet service provider expansions to unserved homes. We understand from at least the existing internet service providers we've talked to that they are interested in partnering and looking at expansions. We're starting to get data back from the three that have been most responsive on this topic. So there is a potential negotiation to be had here to figure out where those expansions could happen and what how the cost breakdown would be split between the ISP, county, and potentially the municipality where it exists. So on the benefit side of this would result in a faster deployment of broadband to those areas that currently lack it. This would be a way to address the problem, with a much, faster deployment than the other solutions we've talked about so far. The downside is that we wouldn't necessarily, have a guarantee that we'd cover every gap within the county. There may be spots in the county that no ISP is yet ready to commit, even at a high subsidy level, and that would have to be revealed in the course of the discussion. But something that we would certainly have as a potential downside of this approach is there's no guarantee this will lead to a full that every resident in the county would be covered. All right. One other benefit of this is that it would really leverage our public funds with private dollars, that we would get some. So even if federal money wouldn't necessarily be in here, we would get leverage from the private sector. And the final fifth option we wanted to raise just to kind of make it put it plainly on the table, is that there's, another option here, another direction to go, which would be to look at a municipal broadband system. We've heard in a lot of the conversations, concerns regarding things like speed or reliability of internet or pricing or competition. And while we certainly understand that those are, really valid and important concerns, the ways we've been approaching broadband have not really been designed to address those issues. One way to address those issues would be to look at establishing a municipal broadband system similar to what the town of Dryden has begun to engage in. This would be, a whole new potential service that the county would, potentially offer. So there would be a lot of considerations to look at regarding legal and financial and technical and operational feasibility relating to this. So a study of this magnitude would be pretty thick, we'll say. The upside of this is that a system of this magnitude could really potentially address every household in the county and making sure that there are no unserved homes. It can also address many of those other concerns relating to price and competition that came up before. On the downside, this would require a substantial amount of time to both evaluate and establish. There would be a public responsibility for the ongoing costs of maintenance and operation of this system. And it would incur some significant competitive risk, as that would be required to overbuild in areas where this infrastructure already exists and is being provided by a public or by a private operator, by a private ISP. So certainly it's a option we want to make sure is not lost in the mix here, but has pros and cons as well. So as you may have started to kind of think through this, you may realize that these are not all mutually exclusive. Some of these can be acted on independently. So we sort of broke them out into paths forward that really, to consider for how to sort of bundle these together. The first one is just simply to resume the Fujitsu study. This is, basically the status quo of where we are, if we were to, move forward with that. And it would, we have the funding available to do so. The second one would be to stop the Fujitsu study, repurpose those funds to do a survey of the fixed broadband within the county, and then use that information to really inform our negotiations with internet service providers. With a detailed map of where service is lacking, we would have a much stronger position to be in to have those talks with Spectrum or other providers as well. The benefits here is that this would be relatively quick compared to the middle mile fiber proposal or a municipal broadband. The downside is that there's no guarantee this will really address all of the homes in the county, or that it will provide the quality of service that some people are expecting. And the final path forward is similar, is to stop the Fujitsu study and then look into evaluating the feasibility of municipal broadband. Similar set of considerations here. The one other catch here is that this would probably require, we don't really know how much this would cost, we'll say, in terms of the study cost. So that's something that we'd have to look into a little more. So I've been talking for a while here, so I'm sure there are some questions and some thoughts here. We are not asking for a vote or an action today. We just wanted to have this discussion to lay this out here. I have some documents that will be a little more detailed we can share after this, so you can kind of sit down with it and think about it when you're ready to do so. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Martha.
Thank you very much, Nick. Appreciate laying it out so clearly. Is there any, okay, yeah, we don't need the screen. Appreciate that. I see Shauna, and first let me ask, is that Dan in the chambers? And that's a nod, okay. Tiny little piece on the screen. Thank you, thanks, Dan. Glad you're here. Go ahead, Shauna.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we were to stop the study, is there a certain amount that we would receive back?
No, we haven't been invoiced for the study yet, so we would be responsible for the costs incurred to date, which is just about $24,000.
Okay.
Sean, if the legislature had allocated an additional $35,000, so we could put that money toward another option if we desired.
Okay. So the 24 plus 35, or what was the total amount?
The total amount, the net county cost on this was $60,000.
Okay.
We would be responsible for paying roughly $24,000 if we stop it. So that would basically free up 35,000, 36,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we would get their analysis and data up until a certain point?
We would only have what we currently have. There's no other, when we asked them to pause shortly after completing the market assessment, which was the last, the first deliverable. We have that. And as far as I understand, no other work has really been done on the project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we do have the whole report, and that would, so you said 35,000 would be left. If we did the physical survey that you mentioned, we look at 15 to 25,000 of cost there. So the 35 could certainly cover it. 35, that's already in the budget.
Yeah.
Katie, you gonna add something?
I was just going to add one thing of clarification on the market study that was done. The future, the three deliverables that we haven't gotten yet from the Fujitsu study would really be about design, build out cost of just the segment of middle mile fiber that would run along the southern portion of Tompkins County. Just want to be very clear. It's not looking at middle mile for the whole county, just a certain number of miles to get design and cost.
Thanks, Katie. Henry, then Mike, then Annie.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, Nick. Do we have all the information from all the ISPs yet?
No, we don't. I have gotten a pretty detailed set of information from Hafele about areas they're interested in building out and the costs involved there. I have a partial response from Spectrum, which is about half of the towns in the county. It does not include maps, so I've requested that. So it's coming in, but it's not all in yet.
Is it the southern half, or is it just part of the southern half?
For
county?
Spectrum?
Right.
It's all over. It's checkerboard.
Okay, thanks.
Mike?
Hi, Nick, I want to thank you for doing all this. I know it's hard to deal with Spectrum. I mean, I get it. There's a lot of proprietary knowledge there, so I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, if you were looking for a direct, I mean, I'm ready to give a direction. I don't know about the rest of the committee. I mean, I really like B. I think that's kind of the point you're at. I mean, it seems to me that we've got I mean, I know that there are people that aren't covered, but frankly, we do have pretty decent coverage. We're over 90%, I think, for broadband in this county. So it seems like we're really trying to find those pockets, those people who don't have it. And that would seem to be addressed by B. I know you don't want to ever take anything off the table, but I just don't see municipal broadband. I don't see us starting a company. I mean, I talked to somebody about that from the state, and they were like, it works if you own the power company, right? If you have municipal power, for example, like in some places in California, right? Well, then you've already got the trucks, you've already got the customer service, you've got all that business part in place. It would be like our Bolton Point starting something addressing water, I guess. But to start from scratch, it would even require, like you said, just such a huge overbuild too, that's already existing. It just seems like that is not a great direction for the county to go. So.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Mike. Annie. And Dan, if you have questions, raise your hand. Go ahead, Annie.
Thanks, Martha. Well, I like the idea of trying to reduce the costs for people, because that is a huge issue, which I don't know if that can be addressed outside of municipal owning of the ISP. It just seems like, as Mike described, a huge undertaking that I'm not inclined to want to do. I do like the idea, of the second path regarding figuring out what are the stopping the study, current study, and then figuring out the underserved areas, actually the underserved homes then, because I've talked to a couple of the ISP providers. I talked to Lee Hafley recently about, regarding they could help go out and look at these areas, but they'd need to be paid. They need to have somebody, so I don't know if we'd be paying one of the ISPs or getting information. The other thing I just wanted to comment on that Nick said about the map, if we were to, once we do a map, it's only has a short shelf life. So I don't know how much work it would take, but to have something interactive, where as soon as one area or a household or a road gets service that didn't have it before, if they could go in and help update it, the internet service provider, so that we would have a live current map. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. And Dan, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Very good, thanks. First thing I have is a question, I guess for Nick. How much longer do you think we could pause the Fujitsu study and then reactivate it if we wanted? Will they wait around indefinitely?
That's a good question. I'm sure that if we decided to come back to them, there is a shelf life on even the data that they've collected. I'll say that. So a lot of what they have provided so far is based on FCC data, which is updated annually. So I have to check in what the cycle is on that. Because if those assumptions change, then it would change basically the remainder of their project. I can
Nick, if I
look
can
into
jump
it.
in here,
Yeah.
I would add that Fujitsu made it very clear when we started this study that we were getting a special pricing because they were just finishing up the 5-county study near us. We actually had promised them by August we would let them know whether this study was continuing or not. They've been very patient with us, but I would say we would have to do a whole new RFP or renegotiate their contract and costs if we delay this significantly longer.
Okay, well, I would, if we can drag them out a little bit, as long as we can, I guess, I think that's to our advantage, because here's what we're doing. This is what Nick said, and this is what the TCOG, this is what we've said the whole way through, which is this. We paused the study to explore this other option of what it would take to have the current ISPs expand out. And we have not finished that exploration yet. So I think it would be premature to end the Fujitsu study before we've gotten as far as we can with that other exploration. And therefore, I am in favor of starting that physical survey as quickly as we could. We do have the funding for it. And it is what resulted in that new field expansion. That is why they were able to identify that area and pretty quickly are going to be able to bring broadband to 180 homes. So we've already seen that it works, and that it works quite quickly. So I would be in favor of initiating that part of that physical survey as quickly as possible. And in addition to that, the one thing that everybody agrees on is that the census block method is totally inadequate. And this is the antidote to that. This is the way that we solve that problem. The final thing I wanted to say has to do with municipal broadband. Like many of you, I think it would be very interesting to see it. It's kind of maybe an ideal thing to happen, but as Nick's pointed out, a lot of study, a lot of time. It's not something that would happen very quickly. And so where I've come to on that point is, I want to just wait and see what happens in Dryden. They've been working on this for years. And I hope they're successful, I really do. But I guess I'm a little doubtful. And if they can pull it off, then there's a model for us. And if they can't pull it off, then there's some information for us too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Good points. Henry?
Yes, I was just wondering about that very issue, is if we go and do the physical checking, then what happens after that? Once we have that information about all the underserved communities, we know exactly where they are, then what do we do with that information?
Right. The number one thing that seems to make sense for me to do with that information is to really sit down with our ISPs and draw the map and figure out how they're going to expand into those and what it's going to cost. That's the one thing that it's most useful for, because it won't be useful for.
ISPs already know this?
So it's a mix. So some of them have looked into it for the areas that are near their networks, which is in their best, their self-interest. So they know where their service ends and where their competitor's service ends and where those gaps are. And they know it, from whatever they can tell from public data, but that's not, particularly useful, as we've all seen. So they have that information. They also are not particularly willing to share that information, generally speaking, in a public format. So for instance, the proposal of doing an interactive web map showing where all the gaps are, I don't think an ISP would be game for sharing it in that type of information, but potentially we'll see. They may be willing to participate in showing where things have disappeared rather than where they know the gaps are, if that makes sense. So
the other thing I would add, Henry, is that I think an advantage to the county hiring somebody to do a physical survey is then it would be county information. We could share it with whoever we want to share it with. We don't have to sign any non-disclosure agreements. And, information is power. And so the municipalities would have this information, neighborhoods would have this information, would help to find creative solutions to some of these problems, I think.
Okay.
I would agree with a lot of what's been said about municipal, about, doing something practical and concrete and relatively quick. I'm sensing, and looking at the time going by, as always happens, I'm sensing a consensus that path B is preferred. So Henry, was that your idea too? It wasn't clear if that's what you were suggesting.
No, I just was wondering what we would do with the information once we had it, whether we would just, again, do the same thing we did in Newfield and do a piecemeal, which is what Dan was, at least I thought, was against us doing it piecemeal initially. And so I was surprised by his advocacy of option B.
I think the idea here is that we'd get information on all the towns.
Right.
And if nobody wants to bid on the unserved homes in Lansing, well, we can't force them, but we would have all the information at once. Is that right? And Katie, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think one thing we could do is if the sense is path B, we could create some kind of resolution and information for the October HUD meeting to discuss it in more detail. And in the interim, we can talk with Fujitsu about how long they'd be willing to hold off on the study. I will say, if we don't make a decision on the study, then we will have to also come for a contingent budget request, because we won't have that money available to pay for this physical survey study.
Okay. Dan, were you going to try to say something too?
Just that, yes, Henry, you're right. It is a little contradictory to what I've been saying. However, what this is an exploration. It's not, if this solves the problem, then I'm happy to be contradictory.
Okay. Also, do we know when the FCC is going to change its status, change the measurement? Or is that just pie in the sky?
Oh, for when they'll change their methodology to show.
Yes, we're gonna change the methodology for.
Your guess is as good as mine. I wouldn't hold my breath.
Okay.
I heard the FCC commissioner on a NACO call some months ago saying, yes, we need to do this. We're going to do this. But that's a vast project, and who knows? I think we're hearing direction, Katie and Nick, for Path B. And if you'd like to sort of do that prep to bring it to the October meeting, I feel that would be a great way to move forward. I really do. I don't think we can or should promise, taxpayers of the county that we're going to improve everybody's speed and we're going to improve everybody's reliability or lower their cost. I just don't think that's something we can take on, and I'm happy to see if what we can do is incentivize and encourage coverage where there is none at this point. So, so is that what you need? Does that work?
Yeah, that's exactly what we were hoping for with this discussion. We just felt like we needed additional guidance at this point.
Okay, and a resolution makes sense. I don't think it's up to us to just decide that right here. So we'll do something that we then bring to the legislature. And if you get a sense that you need to move it faster and you need a quick HED meeting before October's date, just let us know.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you both. Excellent. I see Dwight here. Dwight, we're going to do the workforce. If everybody can stick with us a few extra minutes, I think we can cover all of our bases today. Hi, Rosemary, and I think you asked for Shannon to be brought in as a panelist. I think Shannon is there?
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. We have a quick presentation. We're going to give some updates on the workforce. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you.
Great, thank you.
Can everyone see that?
Yes. We're not in presentation mode yet.
Now?
Sorry about the dog. Yeah,
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Rosemary Avila, Interim Director for Tompkins County Workforce Development Board. And Shannon Elmore, Youth Services Associate, is joining us today. And before she speaks to you about the Summer Youth Employment Program, I want to share with you some data that came in a few days ago from New York State Department of Labor. So we're happy to announce that New York State is leading in the workforce. So as of September 16th, New York State economy added 28,000 private sector jobs. As of August of 2021, that grew by 0.4%. So we're growing faster than the nation. Good news for our state. And then in regards to our county, our employment rank rate is, we're doing well too. We're up to 5th place instead of 6th back in July. And so we are in a steady over 4%, doing really well compared to other parts of the region. So in-demand occupations are still the same, just like Nick mentioned before: hospitality, hotel industry. These are pretty big still as we're in post-pandemic. So healthcare, retail, education, childcare, advanced manufacturing. And here at the board, we're working with these sectors to create strategies, innovations. How can we go about helping and meeting these demands? So those are conversations, ongoing conversations every day with partners, higher education, IAED, and we're working on that. So our focus for the next few months is going to be to execute in compliance with the local and regional plan, which it's been submitted to NISDL, and it will be approved by the board next week. And that was available at our website for the public to comment and review. And many of the subjects that are inside the local and regional plan are inclusion. We want to close the gaps for people and skills shortage. The WIOA, which is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act delivery and training through the Career Center, and that is open for virtual assistance and training and job seeking, resume writing. That's still working, and they're up to serving our community. And then the sector and innovatives in partnership, and then assisting the businesses with needs. And the talks are with with the Ithaca, City of Ithaca, to work on green jobs and green economy as they work on the new Green Deal. And so we're looking for partnering with them and seeing how we could serve and bring to the table and to the workforce individuals in marginalized communities, youth of color, and just creating a more green job and economy for Tompkins County. I'm happy to take any questions now, if anyone has any questions about that, or we can leave it towards the end when Shannon talks about our summer youth improvement program.
Any questions, folks? Okay, why don't you go ahead?
Go ahead, Shannon, turn it to you.
Sure. Well, thank you for having us. I think at your last committee meeting, Natalie Bernowski had given an update on summer youth employment. So I'm just going to recap now as we kind of reach the close of this year's summer program. So just in case anyone is unfamiliar with this program, it's to provide summer youth employment opportunities for youth ages 14 to 24 in Tompkins County who are at or below 200% of the poverty line or are TANF recipients. So we work closely with our program operators to support their outreach, recruitment, and all of the work that goes into that. Our role in this work is really as monitoring and oversight. The first step in the process is reviewing and releasing an RFP. That usually the reviewing process starts about this time of year with a release of the RFP in February. Bids are due to us in March. Our Youth Oversight Committee will approve the bids as they come through. Those will go forward to our full board for approval to move into contracting. Roughly April or May. This year it was in April. We received 2 bids this year, one from Workforce New York's Office of Employment and Training. The other bid was from the Ithaca Youth Bureau's Youth Employment Services. These bids moved forward and were approved. And when we received notice of allocation from New York State's Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, we were able to write those contracts in May this year instead of July, which was the case in 2020 when funding was very much delayed. And so then programs are off and running. Most of the time, the program operators have already begun their programs, recruiting youth, recruiting work sites and planning, hiring additional staff if needed. That usually starts in April, and the state funding covers May 1 through September 30th. We submit our final reports to OTDA October 15th. So our role throughout this process is with that RFP process, developing the contracts, providing fiscal oversight of how programs are spending their administrative percentage, youth wage and fringe, as well as other participant costs such as supplies needed for work, transportation, etc. My role as Youth Services Associate is to do this monitoring and evaluation piece. I go and do tours and visits at work sites. I get to chat with worksite supervisors about their experience. I get to chat with youth about their experience, which is definitely my favorite part of this job. I monitor their orientations and make sure that they are in compliance with the many variables that OTDA puts forth for them to follow, and also doing file monitoring and review for compliance, as well as checking for attendance at mandatory workshops and financial literacy and other components like that. And then, as we do with our WIOA programs and the summer youth programs, providing that technical assistance for their program development.
Shannon, excuse me, just a couple more minutes then, if you can. Okay.
Yep, next slide, Rosemary. So to give you an update on this year's program, keep in mind that this number is not complete at this time. The program operators do not have to give me a final report until the first week of October. So these are just the rough numbers that I have to date. So approximately 138 youth have been served, 71 youth through the Workforce New York Office of Employment and Training, 67 youth through the Youth Bureau. To date, of all of the funding for this program, over $200,000 have gone directly into the pockets of youth in our community. That's a figure not including fringe or anything like that. This is the straight wage that youth have received. Over 17,000 hours have been worked, and 50 unique work sites throughout a variety of sectors. I've listed a few of them on the bottom of the slide on the right-hand side there, but they span nonprofit work, administrative work, environmental work, maintenance and building, painting, summer camp, childcare, tutoring, just a whole retail. There's a little bit of everything to meet youth's needs. And there is a real committed focus this year to incorporating businesses run by women or people of color. I've included a breakdown of our budget just so you can see that. I know that Natalie had presented to you about the additional funding that we received from the Park Foundation, Community Foundation, and the United Way. So that $85,000 has really helped us. We received approximately $70,000 cut from our usual amount that the state gives us for this program. So this community contribution has allowed us to offset that difference. We've been able to give $20,000 additional dollars to youth wage and fringe, which otherwise wouldn't have been available. And it has allowed us to be able to offer programs as desired to be put forth to serve the most amount of youth without having any real impact on our administrative costs. So that's the breakdown of that, and we'll definitely open the floor for any questions.
Thank you, Shannon and Rosemary. Any questions from committee or other? I guess committee is all who's left on here. This is great. Really delighted that the private sector, that the philanthropic sector stepped up. They did a lot in 2020 and 2021 to make sure the community was upheld, and we really appreciate your working with them on that.
Yeah,
Annie?
we're very thankful. We were very thankful. So we really appreciate that. I was able to serve few more youth that what we thought we wouldn't be able to. It's good.
Annie, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I appreciate, I know this is entailed a lot more work than usual to jump through all these hoops and get the funding and get people connected. So I hope next year's a little bit easier, but I appreciate all you've done to make it make youth employment and employment in general so successful. I mean, on the other hand, we hear, that we need more people to work, but that's a whole nother thing. So I appreciate everything you guys have done on your end.
I have a question about the next topic in our packet. It's budget adjustment and transfer. We don't have to vote on this, but it certainly piqued my interest for a contract with Julia Maddock. Can you explain that, Rosemary? She was our prior director, and so fill us in.
Yeah, we're having the pleasure of working with Julia. As many of you know, there was a transition. Natalie Bernowski left the county, and so I was a deputy director, which I started in July 12th, took the interim director position, and the staff and I decided that it would be a good idea to have consultations from Julia to make sure that there weren't any gaps and make sure that we have everything up to standard and the board running. So it's just going to be for a couple more weeks. She started with us September 8th, and we look forward to working with her a few other weeks and then sort of resume the consultations from then.
I think that is a terrific idea. So thank you for bringing her in. I think that's really, very important source of support. It's quite a transition for you as a brand new employee. So thank you for picking up all the pieces.
Yeah, I want to thank the county administrators as well for providing that and more to our board.
That's great. So important. Anything else from the committee for Shannon and Rosemary? All right. Thank you so much, both of you. Really appreciate the report, and look forward to seeing you in another meeting coming up.
Sure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, Dwight Mengel, we have your final resolution, and this is like one of those painful things to do, to accept money.
Accept money.
So
The state has awarded $405,000 to the county for capital, and it was for TCAT, and TCAT will use the money to help pay for the electric buses that it purchased.
all right, can I get a motion to put that on the agenda? Moved by Henry, seconded by, I can see Shauna. You want to raise your hand, Shauna? Shauna. Thank you, Shauna. This is document 10405, authorization of New York State Department of Transportation, Mass Transportation Capital Project Agreement, Tompkins County and TCAT Incorporated, K007463. So are there any questions from committee members? All right, ready to vote? Is that a question, Shauna? Go ahead.
Yeah, I did have a question. I'm trying to pull the resolution up on my email, but it referred to one of the grants that we received. Can you talk a little bit about what that was?
Sure.
And it gives a reference number.
It was specifically for this purpose. Thank you for sharing the screen. It surprised me for a minute. TCAT asked the county earlier to apply for this funding that was allocated. This funding was allocated. It could have been applied for during the last 3 years. And so TCAT needs it to help with their 7 electric bus purchase. And it takes a long time for these awards and applications to get through the state system. And so earlier in August, the state gave us the formal award, and they attached the agreement for this grant, and we need a resolution.
I think the only question I had was, so the Transportation Capital Project Agreement K007463 only referred to the electric buses. It was not anything in the future that we're working on?
The very first award only relates to the electric buses. What the state does is that they have a 5-year general agreement, and as more awards are made, they are amendments to the agreement. Okay. So I would anticipate that we'll have future amendments to the agreement through 2023.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions for Dwight? All right, let us vote. Henry?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that's unanimous. And Dwight says he's got more money to bring us next month.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, anything else for the good of the committee? All right, thank you, staff, for staying around longer with us. Thank you for committee members for sticking around extra time as well. We are adjourned. Have a good day.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you, Martha.
Thanks.